Today's show is brought to you by CBT Nuggets. You know how much we value ongoing education on the Cloudcast, and CBT Nuggets is exactly what Aaron and I wish we had when we were trying to get our certification early in our careers. CBT Nuggets is all about bringing a personalized touch to learning about cloud computing, virtualization, networking, DevOps, and much, much more. Whether it's their hands-on labs with personalized coaching or the online chat functions that come up with every instructor-led course, CBT Nuggets' team of experts is always there to help you get the most from your training and your path to certification. You can check it all out at cbtnuggets.com/cloudcast and sign up for a free trial. You get access to the full catalog of great training, including virtual labs, quizzes, and other premium features completely free for the first 7 days. That's cbtnuggets.com/cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Brian, it is our end of year review, 2021 in review, and as always, predictions for 2022 as well. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. All the things people celebrate. Hope everybody's doing well. This is always a fun show, but we do always sort of warn people if this is the first time you're hearing it. This one always runs a little bit long. We have a tendency to sort of ramble a little bit in this one, but it was a good year. It was a really interesting year. Why don't we do this? We're going to skip cloud news of the week. Why don't we cover a little bit of what we call sort of podcast business? Because I know from year to year we always like to give folks a rundown on how the show's doing, how it's growing, some numbers, just some stats and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And also a quick bit of trivia I was just thinking of, and this is off script for just a second. So 2021. Lots of virtual work. Everyone's kind of doing things remotely. And for those that don't know, Brian and I, we live, 15 minutes from each other?
Yeah.
10. Thereabouts?
Yeah,
10, 15 minutes. Have we seen each other in person this year?
I
think there was that one time.
Yeah, a couple of times.
You came over to drop off something that got mailed to your house in my name. Other than that, I don't know that we've actually seen each other.
Yeah, we're social distancing. Local social distancing.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought of that. I was like, oh, wow. Holy crap. Anyway,
I know.
Moving on to podcast business, though. So even though we haven't seen each other much in the last year, we crossed 11 years for the podcast. So, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. It'll be 12 years come February. We are, we're like the OGs of the podcasting world. I don't even know that there really wasn't anybody doing this stuff back then, and now there's a million of them. So it's, the fact that everybody listens and we keep growing the show. Thank you to everybody for listening. It's been a crazy 12 years. I got to thinking about it. Like when we first started, this was a very infrastructure on-prem centric show. I don't think we're going to get to the, kind of the year in review. I think maybe the thing that jumps out at me is I don't know that there was all that much things that happened on-prem anymore. I think we've crossed the chasm of where we started to where we are today.
Right. It's taken 11 years, but the Cloudcast is truly the Cloudcast.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. So we crossed 500 shows back in March. I think we're probably going to hit 600 shows next year. So that's kind of a good milestone. I think at one point we did some stats like how many shows The Simpsons had and shows like MASH and some of those things. So we're getting up there into the big numbers. We did about 20% more listens this year than we did before. And we kind of beat our threshold for most listens. So, this first whole segment is all basically just thank you to our audience. The fact that you guys keep growing, keep telling a friend, it's been awesome.
I don't know that we've ever told anyone publicly this as well, but I think it's really funny. Did we ever tell them the story about our provider that we've had for the entire time is Buzzsprout. So we love Buzzsprout.
Yep.
Have we ever told the story about how we were on one of their original plans and they had to kind of come to us and kind of go, hey guys, you really need to start paying your share?
Yeah, we were freeloaders. Well, we weren't freeloaders. We've always paid for it. We've always paid for the show. But yeah, at one point they said, you guys you've exceeded your network bandwidth and so forth. So yeah, but they've always been awesome. And again, it always goes to the audience. We got a couple of awards this year. It was kind of nice. I mean, sometimes we get mentioned by people that say, hey, we like listening to this show and that show when we go on rides. we got named the number one cloud podcast by BuzzFeed. That was pretty cool, like kind of officially named. We got named in one of the top 20 security podcasts, which is a little ironic because I don't think either of us would claim to be security people, but we're lucky to have security's become sort of a day-to-day thing, and we've had some pretty cool guests on there, so that was nice. And then I think I looked. We have people listening, and in some places it's one person, but 130 countries. I mean, to me that's insane.
Yeah. No, it really is.
Thank you to what I want to know. We need to look up some of those countries and just be like, we should send that person a T-shirt as like, the cloud expert for the whole country. Like any questions you have, you can go to that person. And we should, if you're the one person that's in an obscure country and you listen to the show, send us an email, send us a tweet. We will go into the bin. We will find some T-shirts so that you can be recognized as the cloud expert.
Yep. And we had some new launches this year as well. So we did Cloudcast Basics, and we did that in a slightly different format. We did that almost like in a seasonal and binge dumping them into the feed kind of thing. We ended up doing 4 seasons of Cloudcast Basics.
Yeah.
And that's out there for, so again, anybody that's new to cloud and these concepts, maybe it's somebody new to the industry, maybe it's an executive that you want to help get smarter on it, make sure you pass that around. And then we launched the Sunday Perspective show as well. And Brian, you've been very successful with that and really done a great job just every day, week in, week out on Sundays, getting the Sunday Perspectives done as well. So thank you.
Those have been fun. Those have been kind of I think I started off having one idea for them and they turned into, we did a lot of sort of historic perspectives. We did some things about how to get into different jobs. And so it was a nice way for us to just, kind of talk about other things that we tend to talk about a lot off camera or off microphone, I guess. So that was kind of cool. But so, it was a good year. Thank you to everybody. We're going to talk a lot about, things we talk about, which is like what happened in the cloud and, the guests that we've had in the past. And so we'll get to all that right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by Megaport. Are you looking for an easier way to connect all your clouds that you're using? With Megaport's Network as a Service platform, you can spin up private connectivity to as many clouds as you want, anywhere in the world in minutes, not months. All the world's top cloud service providers, such as AWS, Azure, Google, are already on the network and at your fingertips. And it's all software defined, no hardware necessary. Just point, click, and connect. So if you're looking for a way to improve network performance and security, lower cloud cost, and turn up hybrid cloud and multi-cloud connections quickly and easily, Megaport is the cloud connectivity solution for you. Learn more at megaport.com. That's megaport.com. Reimagine connectivity.
And we're back. And Brian, why don't we launch straight into, this has always been an area that I've found super fascinating, and I know I've gotten comments on it before. A little bit of the financials, and we tend to follow IPOs of guests and folks in the industry, as well as VC funding as well. So why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So one of the things that we always track is the guests that we have on the show, both this year but over the years, like are they getting VC funding? So it sort of helps us know if we're picking guests that the industry thinks are promising and so forth. Not that all the guests aren't interesting in some way, but we sort of track, do they get funding? Do they IPO? Are they acquired and so forth? And up until this year, I think we had, about 65 or 70 of the guests had been acquired in one way, shape, or form. So it was a little more than 10% of the guests at some point have been acquired. And I think the way the numbers worked out, and I'm sort of throwing these out historically just so we have some context, like around $6 billion of VC funding had come in for those some 600 shows, and about $60 billion in sort of outcomes, if you will. So like IPOs and acquisitions and all sorts of stuff, the things that we could track. And the acquisition things are a little skewed. We've had a few like GitHub was a huge number, Red Hat was a huge number, a few of those. But the reason I throw that out there was so in the first, let's say 550, 560 shows, we had about $5.5–6 billion in VC funding that came to our guests. This last year alone, we had $2.5 billion, right? So basically, in 1 year, half as much as we've had in 10 plus 11 years. So there's a lot of money flowing in. Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes to all the people. But I mean, Sysdig had 500 plus million, Net4j 300 million, CockroachDB 280 million. Grafana Labs 200 million, Launch Darkly 200 million, Vercel 150 million. So I mean, like lots of big amount of money flowing in. So that's been a really interesting thing. There's a lot of money, and then on the IPO side. $2.6 billion. So again, not as much as we've seen in the past, but I mean, 2.6. We saw HashiCorp, we saw Confluence, we saw GitLab IPO. So I mean, there's a lot of money in our industry right now seeking great solutions and seeking new technologies, and that's pretty cool and really really healthy. I think it feels a little bit overinflated, but really healthy. That's a good sign.
Yeah. Well, and let me ask you this. This is kind of a conversation topic real quick as well. I've been joking on the Cloud News of the Week when I've been covering some of these round it. Everyone's a unicorn now. But I'm wondering, like, you go back 10 years ago, you would not have seen this number of $100 million rounds and billion-dollar valuations. And is this truly a shift in the VC industry and the IPO industry of like we're seeing more VC rounds for bigger things and delaying IPO? Like, is the model of A round is build the product, B round is perfect the product and get those first couple of customers, C round is pour gasoline on the fire and get a whole bunch of customers, and then IPO as close to C round as possible? Are those days just gone?
I think, I'll give you two answers. I'll give you a little bit of my opinion or kind of thoughts. But the good news is we're actually going to have a show coming up after the break, or after January, that we're really going to kind of dive in with some folks from the VC community to kind of get their perspective. But I mean, my 2 cents, I think it's a couple things. One, the cost of capital has been so cheap lately, right? I mean, it's 2%, 0%, depending on where it is in the country or around the world. So there's a lot of money flowing that's easy to get. So I think that's part of it, right? And how long that'll last, you never really know. And I think the other thing, and this is just my gut feel, but I think, way back in the day, you weren't necessarily competing with these mammoth companies of the big three cloud providers or an Apple or a Netflix or whatever category you were in, or a Tesla that had just massive amounts of cash. You were sort of like, the biggest company, a Cisco or an Oracle or a Microsoft, were really big, but they didn't feel as massive. And I think what's going on, the reason we're seeing so much money flow in is these VCs are like, we have to fund these things at significantly higher levels in order to either get like first mover status or to give them any chance of sort of David and Goliath in that. And, I don't know exactly how they do it, but it feels like those two things.
It's an arms race of money.
It is. And when the money is really cheap, it's different. If money was 5%, 6%, 8%, I mean, like this is the thing I hear all the time is, you'll hear people that are, smart at financial modeling say, look, if the stock, if the interest rates go up 1%, like the stock market's going to drop like 50%, right? So I think there's a lot of leverage built into these things. But for now, get as much money as you can, build up those war chests. We've seen this, happen in the past where smart CFOs go, when money's cheap, I'm going to build up a huge war chest because I don't know what the next year is going to look like or the next 2 years or whatever. So I think we're seeing a little bit of that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that was really cool is, there were a few other acquisitions. We don't list them all by money because sometimes they're not announced and we don't necessarily like to speculate. But I thought the other thing that was pretty cool was a lot of people that we've had on the show did some pretty awesome stuff, right? Like you went off and dedicated yourself. You completed your first half Ironman. Half Ironman triathlon, which was freaking awesome.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a lot of work, and not just to like if anybody who's either have done triathlons or thinking about triathlons. The running joke is why be good at one sport when you can suck at three? And like from a technical standpoint, I got across the finish line, and I'm going to do some more next year actually. But it was fun. It was entertaining. And I learned a lot and a lot more to improve on for next year. But yeah, got the first one under my belt.
Yeah. So that was cool.
Burned 4,000 calories in one day.
Oh, wow.
Was the thing. Yeah, it took
That
me
is
about 6 hours.
That is a lot of cookout milkshakes after the run. As for anybody who's listened for a long time knows that anytime Aaron goes right to the milkshake after the event is done.
Exactly. Yep.
A couple other things that I thought was pretty cool. Longtime friend of the show, Peter Eulander, was named CMO at MongoDB. They're growing like a rocket ship, so congrats to Peter. And he's building a very, very cool marketing team over there. A lot of companies that are, had formerly been open source software are now blowing up in the SaaS space. We're going to get to that. Our friend Kenny Coleman, who has been on the show a number of times, both as a technologist, but also, as a fellow podcaster, launched his own line of bourbon. He's been doing bourbon for a while, but officially launched his first bourbon, his first rye. So Bourbon Pursuit, and Pursuit Bourbon is doing awesome. So it's cool to see people's, hobbies, our friends' hobbies kind of turning into things. And then, probably your favorite, Andy Weir, who wrote the Martian book, wrote another book, Project Hail Mary. So it's, probably fits in your science fiction category.
Oh yeah, and I read it, within a couple of days of it coming out, and blasted through it in a couple of days. A very good book, highly recommend it. I definitely enjoyed that. And then we had, just some acquisitions as well. Past guests on the show, Cloud Checker got picked up by NetApp, Cloud Physics got picked up by HPE, A Cloud Guru, very good friend and early entered and kind of helped define the serverless space. They were acquired by Plural Insight. New Stack, Alex and everyone over there, they were acquired by Insight Partners. So lots of changes, as there always is year to year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's kind of dive into sort of trends and stories. I think, we cover a lot of stuff in Cloud News of the Week. It's sort of random throughout the year. Like there might be an earnings announcement, there might be a cloud outage, there might be 10 new capabilities announcements. But let's kind of I think on this show we always try and structure them a little bit and kind of put things in a bigger context, and then it sort of helps us think about what might come in 2022. I guess we should probably start with the biggest news story of the last 2 years, which is COVID, still existing. We're now on to a third or fourth variant, whichever one you're sort of listening at the time you're listening to this. But it did do some really interesting things, right? I think it completely redefined where people work. I got a really interesting email from LinkedIn letting me know, how many people had changed. I think let's say I've got, I don't know, however many thousand people that I follow me on LinkedIn. I had 800 people in this last year change jobs. So
wow.
They literally came back and they said like 25% of people changed jobs this year, which is nuts. But I think a lot of it, and you and I have sort of lived this life for a long time, but when you can work, when you aren't bound to, Austin, San Francisco, Seattle, Boston, wherever, a lot of pretty interesting and creative things happen. So I think, to me, that's the first biggest takeaway was, the shift in where people worked, where they could work, where opportunities came along. That was really pretty far reaching, if you will.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if you had this happen to you personally or not, but we get hit up by recruiters, every once in a while, and it's funny with us being in Raleigh, it's a tech hub, but it's maybe not as big of a tech hub as some of the other cities that were just mentioned. And a lot of times, one of the first questions was always like, "Are you willing to relocate?" And
right.
For at least for me right now, and I think you're the same. Like my answer at this point in time is no. And then they're like, "Okay, well, thank you."
Right.
But that was you just qualified yourself out of that one with that recruiter, and that hasn't necessarily happened anymore. There is more of that, and we're hearing of a lot more of that. I know there's been a lot of our friends here in the area, have, as you mentioned, have changed jobs, but have changed jobs in something where they're able to work from home. And a lot of times for us in the past, it was like, well, we got on planes a lot. You right. traveled a ton before this, and I traveled a good bit as well leading up to it. Don't travel anymore. Don't plan to travel. And it's interesting because I think a lot of folks kind of were like, well, at some point we're going to have to go back to all of that. I still don't see that happening. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but I don't see it happening in the near future.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've when it all happened, it was pure panic. Nobody knew what was going to happen. We all thought it was going to be a short-term thing. Then it dragged into a long-term thing. It dragged into this year. And I think by this year, people had sort of figured out like, okay, how am I going to work in this given kind of I don't know what the end date's going to be, right? And so you saw a lot of those things happen. But we've also seen a lot of companies who have sort of said, hey, we have been remote first or remote only or whatever since day one. So GitHub, HashiCorp, two sort of famous ones for being really, really remote friendly, and they're doing really well. And so I think sometimes it's just like any change we have in technology. Like you talk about like, hey, this change is going to be the thing that's going to happen, or this will be better. And there's always a lot of pushback, and change is hard, and people resist change. But it's been going on now for coming up on 2 years. I think people now see what it is, and I think they've figured out like, hey, I can be relatively productive. Unfortunately, we're probably burning people out and driving them crazy. But the other thing is, I got to imagine there's a lot of CFOs who are like, hey, I now have some options on getting out of a lot of rent or buildings or whatever, and I'm not opposed to people working from home. Give them the fanciest monitors they want, give them the nicest chairs they want. It's still way cheaper than having a building in downtown San Francisco or New York or any of those sort of places. So, I think we're now at the stage where it's like, okay, this is an option for normal. It won't be everybody's normal, but it'll be an option for normal. And for those of us that work remote, like that's pretty awesome.
Yep. Agreed. You want to talk clouds?
Yeah. I mean, we always kind of come back to follow the money. That's always sort of the first place we start and the last place we end. Amazon, $60 billion. Azure ended up right around 60 billion, give or take. We always talk about Azure's a little trickier to measure, but AWS and Azure are neck and neck, both in that roughly $60 billion range, both growing more than 30% year over year. So, I mean, they're going to be closing in on $80 billion next year. They're slowing down some, as you would expect with big numbers. And then GCP is around 15 billion. And GCP, I think AWS and GCP are the really the most interesting ones for very different reasons. I think GCP is sort of showing, hey, I can make money. There's been a lot of articles written here lately about Kurian, the CEO, about like, are his tactics working from a money perspective? Are his tactics working from a Google culture perspective? We always knew those would be sort of counterintuitive. But yeah. Most importantly with them is going to be, does the Google sort of leadership say, they said back in 2017, we need to be number 2 by 2023. That's coming up pretty quick, and they've got a long way to go. So Google is really interesting to watch in terms of, which culture is going to win out. Will the leadership stay in place? And so that's a really interesting to watch. But it's really, really different than what's going on at AWS.
Yep, agreed. AWS, new leadership and you kind of did the wrap up show on reInvent itself. reInvent felt a little different, right? And I was actually surprised at how many people did go to the show. Yeah. Neither you or I went to the show, but you did an analysis of it. But I will say this: it is very apparent they're both trying to stay the course and differentiate themselves slightly. Going into very specific verticals and right. Doing very specific application in the cloud stacks, if you will, and some of these other things. And so I think that is a good logical next step for them. And I'm interested to see where all of that goes. And this goes into this larger concept too of, you and I have been kind of talking this idea of a super cloud, yeah. Right. And or just like overlay of cloud services where, there's a lot of companies out there that, hey, at the end of the day, it's a SaaS service. It's a SaaS service that is, probably running on top of one of the big clouds, and it has some kind of cloud native service behind it. Snowflake is the one that's mentioned the most, but there's so many others out there.
Right.
And what happens going forward, right? Does the idea of AWS, Azure, or GCP going directly to the consumer, how much does that matter if somebody like some of these other big companies are building on top of them anyway?
Well, and I think what's really going to be interesting is for the longest time, it was, Amazon would come out with something that was really new, right? So, I mean, even EC2, you could argue like, oh, well, it's compute, it's a virtual machine, but like, it was really new. It was on demand. It had all these different ways you could pay for it. It had different ways you could scale it. And then, they sort of built up these primitives, these main things, which were, pretty amazing, S3, all those sort of things, RDS. And then they started filling the bucket with, a lot of nice services. But it felt like for a long time, those services were like, they were feature lacking, but they were like, hey, I have everything, right? Like I have everything you want. We're the sort of everything store. And I think we're now seeing this sort of next generation of things built on top of those primitives, right? So Snowflake or, CockroachDB or MongoDB Atlas or whatever. And they're just significantly better in terms of features and capabilities. And then they're starting to build in this stuff that's like, and oh, by the way, yes, you can tell me you're in AWS, but if you just want to extend it to Azure, like I'll just take care of it for you. And that's, I think, the premise that's sort of, some people have called it super cloud. Some people have called it some other stuff, distributed cloud, right? They're not calling it like hybrid or multi, but it's sort of this new overlay. I think that's going to be really interesting because again, it beats the clouds in the sense of like, if I can give you a better experience than this one that they have, which is sort of notoriously coming back being feature lacking, will people keep using Snowflake versus Redshift or MongoDB, from Mongo as opposed to sort of the copycat open source only version? I think we're starting to see that like, if you're really good, if you build differentiation, like that can be successful and the market rewards you for that.
Yep. Agreed. And then I'll take it another area, if we kind of go the opposite way of others that are up and coming or, getting known for other things, there's Cloudflare. We talked about it in Cloud News of the Week. They keep introducing some things and they're kind of chipping away areas that, again, AWS customers in particular, they might be, it's both a high profit cost center for AWS as well as a high pain point for customers, right? And people have historically written it off as a cost of doing business, right? But that's an advantage an opportunity for a company like Cloudflare to come along. If they can do it cheaper and they can reduce some of the friction, there's a market advantage for them. And then there's DigitalOcean, right? DigitalOcean historically, and again, friend of the show, they've been always courted to developers primarily and more of like becoming like the developer in SMB cloud, right? And so you're starting to see, hey, some of these companies, maybe I don't want to go out there and compete with the big three. Maybe I want to define my own smaller market category or sub-market category, whatever we want to call it. And I'm going to differentiate in this smaller market category and cater to this audience, right? Because there's enough people there and I'm growing at a decent enough clip. You don't need to always be the big fish in the big pond. Yeah,
I think that's a thing, as we get into 2022 and we start looking more like, if you look at the big three, they've all sort of filled out their portfolio. They all have 100 plus services. How many of them are really good versus other, people can determine that. But, when you get that big, the market tends to go, I'm going to kind of chew away at things. I'm going to find places that have become blind spots for you or, you're not paying as much attention to. And I think you highlighted it, right? Like DigitalOcean's kind of eating away at their SMB space. They're trying to go after that SMB part of it. You've got, Cloudflare just openly being like, we're going to go after your bandwidth networking costs. And then I think the other area that's really interesting is this whole sort of like, Vercel and Netlify and some of these that basically are these like sophisticated and Cloudflare is doing the same thing, sort of like this sophisticated sort of like web edge / SCDN / basic computing that, as things become more mobile or, people are like, hey, maybe I'll use a couple clouds or whatever it is, like they become more interesting. And I think all of those folks, are figuring out like, I'm not going after them. I can't spend $40 billion in CapEx, but I can chip away at these things. And they're going to be really interesting ones to watch because, in the past, like a big vendor, if somebody like that was eating away them, they would go buy them. But the AWSs and Azures and Google don't seem to be acquirers as much. They sort of seem to have this DNA of like, we're just going to keep building the things that, we know how to build it for our systems. So I think we're going to get to an age where competition is going to come back into the game, but it's just going to come at it not as another big player, but just lots of like little ankle biters, little flanking from the left, flanking from the right.
Yep. And I also wonder too, thinking out loud for a second, you and I have both seen many times and also been part of it at times, acquisitions into larger companies. And let's just say for a second, one of these things happens where, AWS decides they're going to change their model and go start doing, a bunch of acquisitions, for instance, right? Well, you and I have both seen those and been on the inside of those. Like, they don't always go well, right? Like, the tech is different, the culture is different, the people are different, the founders leave, like all of these other things happen. And something I've always kind of had in the back of my head is like, how often does this acquisition into, to get into a new market, how often does it really work? Right? Because I feel like that percentage of times, like, yeah, like I get it. You want to go fast and you want to get into a market really fast. But then also too, like I can completely see, hey, you know what? If we have the money and the time and the resources to go build and compete on the longer term, let's just go do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they do have the money. I mean, we know they have huge piles of cash, and yeah, you're right. I mean, most acquisitions, maybe 1 in 10 pan out for companies. I know that from being at Cisco for a long time, but also being at companies on both sides of it. You've been on both sides of it. Like, it's really hard these days to get the right technology fit, get the right culture fit, the right business model aligns. And, that I think is probably, you're right. It's probably part of it. It's like they don't acquire because they just know that acquisitions don't tend to pan out terribly well, or the best people tend to leave. So, I think that's the other part of why we're seeing, going back to some of the stuff we talked about at the beginning, we're seeing these, D, E, F, G rounds, because these companies are like, look, the exits aren't, the acquisition exits are a little harder, especially when we have big valuations. We might as well just drag this thing to IPO and then use the IPO as another funding round. So we'll get into some of that stuff early next year when we dive into it.
Well, and let me ask you this to kind of extend that out a little further too. Like, again, cloud providers, right?
Yeah.
They really haven't acquired legacy software companies, infrastructure companies. And at the end of the day, like everyone fully admits, like the growth area a lot of times these days might be into enterprise on-prem data centers, right? And there's Outposts, there's Arc, there's Anthos. They just keep adjusting these offerings and twiddling and tuning, and everything I've seen so far is limited success. I won't say a failure by any means. The products continue to grow, they continue to get customers, but they're not growing like wildfire.
No,
either.
There's been, they launched, the industry sort of freaked out. Oh my gosh, they're going outside the cloud. They're talking cloud differently. But yeah, there's been big articles written about, Anthos being, maybe a $10 million business for GCP, and, Andy Jassy being frustrated that Outposts haven't taken off faster than they are. And, on paper, they've done a lot of the right things, not to knock any of those solutions. They, on paper, they sound really interesting. Like, we're going to extend our control plane and our services out to your environment. They've, sort of gotten through the whole thing of like, do we do this on your own provided hardware? Do we provide our own hardware? But I think at the end of the day, it boils down to the real basic thing of like, if you've ever dealt with anybody's data center, there are never two that are exactly the same. And there's always nuance. And whereas if you're dealing with the cloud, like, it's always the same, or at least it's 99% closer to being the same than, the politics, the people, the weird things that go on in the data center. And it's just, that part's really hard. I think about this sort of, coming back to things we talked about at the beginning. For us, we got started, this show had a lot of VMware talk. We had a lot of people that would listen because they were VM admins and they were trying to figure out maybe what was going to be next. Can you think of any announcement other than going, spinning out and being public again as a completely independent public company that came out of VMware this year?
Nothing that I would call significant or surprising.
No, I feel like
I just feel like it's extensions of the existing value prop. in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they've made somewhat interesting numbers. I mean, there's been some growth, and the SaaS business is growing a little bit. But I mean, like, yeah, I don't feel like there was anything significant, especially in the stuff that they do on prem. Like their SaaS business is maybe a couple of $1 billion now, which is the stuff they sell to cloud providers, which is interesting. But I feel like the on-prem stuff for them is, there's some networking edge stuff that they're doing, some SD-WAN, but I mean, like, if you had said like 5 years ago or 8 years ago, like you're going to know of VMware as a player in the networking space, and that's maybe the most, news they're going to make in a year, you'd be like, no, you're out of your mind. They're going to be they're going to be a cloud player and a hybrid cloud, and it's like, yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's, and maybe it's partially because we don't pay attention to them as closely as we used to, but, I don't feel like anybody's, freaking out by what VMware did. And I think that's just another sign of, the things going on-prem are far less, making change than the stuff happening in the cloud in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. Well, and I'll extend it into, kind of similar topic, maybe a little bit. Kubernetes, right? Kubernetes, I mean, it keeps growing, and there's more releases and everything keeps going. But, and again, you're close to it day to day. So, I'll kind of give my view on it outside looking in, because I'm definitely more outside looking in on this. I feel like a little bit like that of like, okay, the hype has died down a little bit. And there's always this idea of like, especially, again, those with a startup mentality, they want to go do cool stuff. They want to get visionary stuff. They want to go do new stuff. It almost feels like Kubernetes is reaching that I don't want to say steady state, but it has slowed down, and some of that excitement has moved into other areas almost adjacent to Kubernetes in many ways.
Yeah, Kubernetes is in an interesting place because, I mean, it's not that the technology has sort of stopped, but it has become much more, make it stable, right? I mean, they did this weird thing where they're going to move from 4 releases a year to 3 releases a year. To me, why they didn't just go to 2 or even 1 a year, I don't totally get that. I feel like most of the companies that I know, they either are like, hey, I know how to upgrade clusters, I'll just do it myself. So whenever you give it to me, cool. Like they're not consuming features at the pace that there was back, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. They may as well go to a more LTS kind of life cycle. But you're right. It's, people talk about Kubernetes as being boring, which is what infrastructure should ultimately be. You're right. There's a lot of adjacent stuff, and maybe we'll get into some of that in a few minutes. I think the other thing people are kind of realizing is, a lot of the, Kubernetes is sort of hitting the sort of like growing in the market. There's much more adoption. It's in much more places. Like we talk about it on the edge, and we talk about it in the cloud and managed cloud and on-prem. And, but there's also, it's also hitting sort of a trough of disillusionment in terms of, hey, where's the great developer experience that was sort of promised to us that, we didn't do PaaS anymore because we're going to do Kubernetes. And, we're kind of coming back to seeing this thing where people are going, oh, okay, it didn't materialize. Like we're going to have to go create what that thing looks like. And so there's this whole new kind of buzz around like, okay, is anybody going to figure out how to make it easy for developers to use Kubernetes? And, but yeah, you're right. Kubernetes is sort of stable. Everybody gets that. There's people trying to find those skills. But yeah, the buzz around it, whether it's at KubeCon or whatever, is now around GitOps, it's around software supply chains, it's around service mesh and like how service mesh is going to evolve, all those other things, which, is pretty normal and natural for a place. But, nobody's writing articles anymore about it. Like, hey, it's the 5th or 6th birthday of Kubernetes. Like that train has long since passed and people don't care about that anymore.
Yeah.
But, in that context, security has blown up over the last couple of years. A lot of acquisitions. I think we're going to see a ton of acquisitions in this space. I mean, we talked about Sysdig, but there's a ton of companies. You just need a couple of really high-profile hacks to remind everybody, like, hey, none of you are very good at security. None of you are very good at keeping up with software updates. None of you are very good at patching. it's not something that you prioritize. And every time this happens, boom, you get these massive things, whether it's, the new Log4j thing or, the SolarWinds hack. So software, secure software supply chains is not a buzzword going away anytime soon, or DevSecOps. It will be discussed a lot, but and I think we're going to see a lot of money flow into that space.
Agreed. The last trend we'll get into, and then we'll actually get into some predictions here for a little while. I just wanted to talk about, even though it's so funny, like, I can hear some people when I mention all of these words, some people will get really interested and some people will just groan. And that's metaverse, Web3, crypto, and NFTs. And you and I both, like, we've been very, admittedly, I don't know that we've ever said it publicly, but we've both, I think, been very skeptical of all of it. But then I started digging into all of it a couple years ago, a couple months ago. Now I don't know metaverse and NFTs necessarily, but the Web3 stuff and the crypto stuff, I started digging into it mainly just because I was like, all right, I want to go understand this. I keep hearing this this set of buzzwords more and more and more. And I will say this, and it'll go into my predictions more so later on. The underlying blockchain tech I find really, really fascinating. But there is so much confusion to go along with the hype. And that's the biggest thing right now. And I also think certain things, they're just going to get a bad reputation, and it's always going to be that way. I don't think NFTs will ever get a good reputation in the industry. And the only way to make NFTs get a good reputation is to rebrand them or call them something else that's going to have a better connotation at some point. Like, I just think NFTs are almost to the point of being permanently, just written off as stupid.
Yeah. This is another topic I think we're going to get into in one of our look aheads here in January, kind of talk to some folks who can be a little bit objective about it. But yeah, I mean, I think to me, the biggest challenge of this space is like most of the attention tends to be around the crypto piece of it, right? And cryptocurrencies and speculation and there's rightfully so a lot of craziness there and a lot of, like, hey, wait, this doesn't align to the thing I'm used to in terms of like money or whatever. So yeah, that's, and I think the more I read about it, the more people are like, well, Web3 is really just the rebranding of all the bad PR that came out of, crazy crypto stuff. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting. I feel like the last month or so, and I don't mean to sort of be negative about this, but like I have read more articles that are just like, I mean, from very smart people, from very, people who have done stuff. And again, maybe it's just old man yelling at the metaverse or whatever, but like who are just like, this stuff is either I can't understand it or it's all just, it's either bullshit or it's a scam or whatever. And I need to dig into some of those articles, but like it's hit all of a sudden in the last 3 or 4 or 5 months, and maybe it's just because more eyeballs are on it, or maybe it's because Facebook changed their name to Meta, or I don't know what it was, but like we have come to a head really, really quickly. And there needs to be some way to like get people to go, how do I make sense of it? Right. I saw a really interesting tweet from Kelsey Hightower, who we've had on the show and lots of people know is just a really smart dude. And he's like, I can't make sense of any of this. I wish somebody would just like, where's the hello world of Web3 that I can go play around with? And he's like, and I kind of feel like if Kelsey can't figure some of that stuff out, us not as Kelsey smart people are going to struggle. And the last thing you want is, I mean, it's fine if you want to be a niche and maybe you're going to make a lot of money in it, but if the mainstream can't figure out what your thing is and you constantly just have to tell them, well, you're too dumb to figure it out, or you just don't understand, like as a marketing person, like that's not the best message to have. So I'm super interested to figure out how we unfogify this thing, because maybe it is really interesting and maybe it is the future. It's just, it's hard. It's hard for us dumb ones to figure out what it is.
Agreed.
You want to get into predictions? We do this every year. These are obviously always destined to fail, because if we could barely be good at predicting, we'd probably be out of these jobs and living on an island somewhere. We put our predictions we always are sort of transparent. We put them out year over year. We'll put links in the show notes to our previous ones. You want to go first? You want to throw out some ones guaranteed to be perfect?
I'll throw out the first one, and actually it just is a direct tie to something we already talked about, and that And it's something I predicted previously. And it kind of sort of, I mean, it got more attention, but again, going back to zero trust models and security, I feel like between the rise of ransomware, then what you had mentioned earlier about, supply chain vulnerabilities, and then combine that with, probably one of the most secure jobs and highly sought after jobs in our world right now is folks that do like AWS IAM full time, like the cloud security person, right? And so this idea of like all of the different areas and all of the different vulnerability spots and all of the risk associated, especially with like a ransomware attack. I mean, it is just getting insane. And you can tell now, and again, as more and more companies are going all in with digital, even if their day job isn't necessarily like a brick and mortar company store, but they want to do a website and they want to do digital transformation. Well, guess what? Security vulnerabilities, there's supply chain vulnerabilities, there's all these other things going on. And so for me, like, I think this just keeps getting ratcheted up every single year. And it is really reaching a critical moment in our industry with zero trust models.
Yeah. Yeah. No, security will always be top of mind and just never kind of gets funded to the level that it needs to, or it never gets, it's always like, I don't want to get hacked, but I also don't want to, I don't want to prioritize having anything slow down either. And nobody's quite figured out how to find that right balance, but you're right. It's just not getting any better. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Like, there's probably somebody, riding in the car going for a run that works in security that's shaking their fist going, it is getting better. Like, but it feels like, and maybe this is just kind of like when you have like, if you have like really good referees in a sporting event and you never hear from them, and then all of a sudden there's like one bad call, all of a sudden it's like referees are terrible. Maybe that's the way security is. Like, maybe it is mostly really good, except for those, one or two times when it's really bad and they get the bad end of the stick or whatever. But so we both have a few things sort of predicting where we think the cloud providers will end up. One thing that's really interesting to me, and this isn't so much a prediction, I guess it's a prediction, but it's sort of an observation that I think is interesting. I've been really interested in seeing all the people who are sort of publicly leaving AWS. And I don't know if this is just a result of, their stock prices, slowed down a little bit from the crazy, thing it's done over the last few years. And AWS tends to pay a good chunk of what they do in stock appreciation. So people have just said, hey, maybe I'll leave because I can find other places. But I feel like there's going to be a generation of AWS people who really know how AWS works really well. They've lived it internally. And they've sort of, they see the crystal ball a little bit. And I think some of these folks that we see leaving are going to go start the next generation of not clouds that compete with AWS, but like the next interesting services, right? I think if you've got the insight as to how people are using Amazon and all those sort of things that we always say give them kind of an unfair advantage to building the next services, I think we're going to see a lot of these people that say, hey, I'm hanging up my AWS hat, if you will, are going to start these next generation things. And I think that's going to be sort of interesting because usually, whenever there's the, like we've seen the VMware mafia or we saw the PayPal mafia or whatever people call it, like I think we're going to start seeing the AWS mafia, if you will, become a lot of these next generation companies, which are always fun to watch.
Yeah. And we've talked about it. We hadn't talked about it recently, though. I was going to say we've talked about it a bunch in the past, but I mean, after 500 and some shows, I don't know that we've talked about it in a while. The old model of pioneers, settlers, and farmers, right? And what we're, I think, starting to see, just like we did, there's the pioneers that kind of built everything and were out in front and forging ahead. And guess what? They don't like it when it gets boring, or they don't like it. That's just kind of what drives them, is charging ahead. And so it is a natural progression. The way I look at it is what we're seeing here is a maturity model. And like you had mentioned earlier, hey, we're not seeing triple digit growth anymore year over year because the numbers just get too big. And you look at the size of these organizations, there just isn't room for the pioneers, or well, maybe there is, but they're not interested anymore. They want to move on.
Yeah. So it's not an indication of the company being bad. It's just we've seen
Exactly.
this throughout history. It's there are people that are great for certain years or certain part of the crossing the chasm curve, and there are others who fit at a different point in time. So yeah, no, I think that's we're just at that time. It's less an indication of because I think I said after the AWS show, like I wouldn't be surprised if their revenue numbers just blow up from going forward because we're hitting the bigger part of the market, right? We're not hitting the sort of upward slope, we're hitting the fat part of that curve. So yeah, I think it's just horses for courses, if you will. I think people say.
Yep.
What else you got?
So along those lines, I'm going to talk about Microsoft here. I really do think, because now what you're starting to see more and more, and you had mentioned earlier, when we're talking about, revenues and published revenues, Microsoft always loved to blend everything together and see, how big they are, but it was always had a lot of other things in there. Well, guess what? I really do think going forward, maybe it's this year, maybe it's next year, but I do think Microsoft will become the top public cloud worldwide. And I think AWS has long held that cherished number one spot. But I just think, again, where they are and where they're positioned, and you look at where we're headed. Again, you said about mentioning crossing the chasm. Well, I think AWS was better positioned for the early adopter market. But I think Microsoft is better positioned once you cross the chasm into that mid adopter to late adopter market. And so that, I could see very easily see a situation in which Microsoft overtakes AWS longer term. And, it could be one of those, hey, the first 10 to 15 years, AWS was number one, but as the market matured and grew, Microsoft became number one.
Yeah, no, I could most definitely see it. Microsoft has, a track record of being a fast follower, right? They've grown. I think the things about Microsoft that are really interesting to me is, I think the whole GitHub, the things that GitHub is now able to do in both from just like keeping your code to collaboration to all those sort of things they've done forever is interesting. But all the stuff they're doing about, giving developers access to computing power right within the platform, being able to do stuff that's more serverless oriented, more, GitHub runners and tasks and all those sort of things. I think that's super powerful and underappreciated. And then I think the other part is, as we get into the more mainstream users of the cloud, like they're going to, and I've mentioned this a million times, like they don't just want primitives. They want higher level things put together for them. And Microsoft just has a better track record of being like, I get how to make things into applications that you use as opposed to just building blocks that you then have to piece together yourself. And, if we think about the maturity of the cloud and who's kind of coming into it, you've got the tool that all the developers use natively, and then you've got this other mechanism to cover the enterprise. I think, it puts Azure in a really good position. They've done a really good job of acquiring and catching up and again, eating away at things that Amazon is not necessarily great at. They're not great at developer experience. They're not great at building higher level sort of application level things. And again, Amazon is fighting a multi-front battle with a lot of different people.
Agreed. Do you want to close out with, I know we both in our predictions put something related to Alphabet and Google. Do you want to close out with where we think that's going to go? Yeah,
I think that, like I mentioned at the beginning, Google's going to, apparently, I never remember if it's George or Thomas Kurian. I think it's Thomas Kurian is the CEO of GCP.
Thomas, yeah.
It's one of the Kurian brothers.
Well, the only reason I know that is because I was at NetApp when we just said GK when GK was there. So I always in my head have to go, well, it's not GK.
It's TK. So the one that their mom loves the most, the one who runs Google.
Right.
Apparently his contract is coming up, whether it's in 2020 and 2022, 2023. I think he's sort of proven that he can find a way to make them money. It's probably not, in the most optimal way that like the Google culture would think, but we always knew that like the Google culture was never about talking to people, and selling to the enterprise is about talking to people. And so I think he's sort of cracking that code. But I think, from what I hear, they're finally going, well, I'm not just going to sell you the cloud. I'm going to sell you marketing services around ads, and I'm going to sell you access to super smart data scientists and engineering. And I think he's figured out how to take the totality of what, Google and Alphabet do, even though they're far behind, and they're applying that to these companies. And I think, if you do that in the right way for a company that thinks like, I've got to go through massive digital transformation, that's kind of appealing, especially if you're like, we're not at our core a technology company, we're a car company, we're a pharmaceutical. So I will be very surprised if Google does the Google thing and says, hey, we're giving up on this. I think it's gotten too big. It probably doesn't make enough money yet to really be make or break at Google, but I feel like they're gonna sign up at least for version 2 of Thomas Kurian doing his thing and figuring out what he can do with it if they throw some more money at it. So I'm probably more bullish on they'll survive after 2023. I don't know that I'm bullish that they'll become number 2 or whatever, but I think he's cracked certain codes that are probably appealing to the higher ups at Google that they could build upon.
Agreed. And so my portion of that is, yeah, I don't think they'll get number 2. I think they'll settle into 3. But again, if you look at, and this is something you and I have talked about both on show and off show, if you look at the idea of take market categories, right? And in this instance, we have the huge market category of public cloud. And in any category, historically, you're going to have a category king. And then you're going to have somebody who's, the number 2 that's pretty big, that's going to keep them honest. And then you might have a number 3. But you very rarely, without going into like DigitalOcean and subcategories like we talked about earlier of like, hey, I want to be the SMB and developer cloud. There just isn't that much room for anyone else in that category anymore. And so for me, Google can be a very good third. But I think the way Google continues to do that is they do actually take a little bit of that Google DNA and apply it and almost become a like, hey, we're the public cloud with these kinds of Google specialized services, right? Like dig into what makes Google Google and embrace it and not try and be, hey, I'm the Azure or I'm the AWS, but and like I can tell you, for instance, again, talking to customers and some of the products and partners that I talk to, like I can tell you right now, it's not out there in any of their stuff, but Google, the Google Cloud from a like reaction times and API calls, it is like bar none the fastest cloud out there. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so like how do they become like the performant cloud or like, the AI cloud or some of these other things? And so how do they take a little bit of that Google magic dust and sprinkle it in to differentiate themselves and just honestly embrace third, but become their own identity and they're third, but they're also this kind of cloud that attracts a very specific customer.
Yeah. And I think honestly, I think that approach works. It can work for Google, but I think it could also work for a Cloudflare or it could work for a DigitalOcean because, if we went back to the original, like when we first were doing the show and everything was sort of like these central buying centers, that might not have worked, right? You sort of probably had to pick one, but we're seeing very distributed buying centers, lines of business, individual groups by project. And those can go to any cloud you want to, right? And because they're so interconnected, you're going to have multiple clouds involved with applications anyways. I think there's an opportunity there to really define who they are for any of these clouds that really define who they are, and for people to go, I'm going to pick the best of breed because I don't want just the average of breed. I want the best of breed. So. Yeah, yep. Lots going on. It's I feel like we're very much at a tipping point for the cloud. Like this is sort of like generation 1, and I feel like we're at the beginning of what's going to become generation 2, which is very cool. It means there's going to be a lot of new stuff for us to talk about, which we always like.
Agreed. Do you want to wrap up there?
Yeah, man. We have been going for a very long time. I tried to warn everybody up front. There's probably nobody still listening at this point, but if you are, thank you. Thank you. We try and thank you every week, but it's amazing to us that people give us some of their time every week, that they reach out, that they give us feedback, that they appreciate us, connecting them with really smart people, and that's always been the goal. So thank you to everybody. I hope everybody has an awesome holiday. I hope everybody gets time with family, and hopefully you come back and give us a little more of your time, and we give you something valuable in 2022.
Agreed. All right. So with that, we will wrap it up from there. So on behalf of Brian and myself, again, thank you. But also, too, if you have a moment, go ahead and rate us on one of the major stores that are kind of out there, wherever you get this podcast. If they have a rating system, we certainly would appreciate it. And looking forward to a fantastic 2022 with everyone.
And we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.